All right. Well, Alison sorts that out. So my name's Laura, and along with these two women here, literally, this has been something that has always been part of my world. It's literally like everything that I'm always the person who says the things that no one wants to hear. So I'd be sitting in a room, someone would think, like, people be thinking things, but I usually have foot in mouth and I end up saying it. But how that has actually come across in business is that after several years in business, be it for myself, working for other people, working alongside some real like multinational businesses in the industry across the world, I'd like to think I know a few things. And so when things kind of crop up or when things are going a little bit haywire, I'm usually the first person to foresee a problem or foresee a pattern that needs to be shifted and changed. And it's typically before anybody's actually got awareness around that. And so when we started talking, and it started as a healing journey for the three of us. And like, but when we started talking and we started like uncovering each of our strengths, something this recurrent pattern just kept coming up. It was like, where it's just like, oh my gosh, that business is doing that thing again, or this place I work for, or this is happening in this space again. And so each of us have got our own stories with that. And so we're like, we should do a live stream. And then that's evolved into we should do a series. And we do actually have dreams of this becoming a bit of a podcast, talking about the things that nobody wants to hear about when it comes to either being in business for yourself, working in businesses, or um, it's the elephant in the room, right? We all think it, we all feel it, but nobody wants to talk about it. So we really want to shatter those illusions. We really want to kind of make business simple again. Come back and actually enjoy what it is that you're doing, whether or not you're working for yourself, whether or not you're actually in business, or whether or not you actually work for businesses. Like, just looking at ways to make things simple. And between the three of us, we'd actually like to think that we actually have a few solutions up our sleeves. So, I'll let Crystal kind of share a little bit about her. And then while Alison gets the stuff sorted, then I'll kind of come back and kind of do a bit of an intro for me, and we'll kind of like get this stuff moving. So yeah. So Crystal, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, love everything that you said. And I feel very similar. Like, even as a child, like I've always been a people watcher, observing situations, and always had this real uncanny ability to look at things differently than what most people do. And I kind of shared this on my personal story. Like, when I originally came into business, I was studying law at the time, and I worked for the Department of Motor Vehicles. And I was 19 at the time. And like within a couple months, I could really see where like management and really didn't have a hold on what was actually going on within the business, and decisions were being made that made no sense, couldn't be executed. And so that really shifted my path really early in life. And I switched my degree to business. And so I do have a bachelor's in business. And I did that because I really wanted to make a difference, and I really wanted business to be able to be done differently. And so, my journey was I spent like 20 years in the corporate industry doing human resources, accounting, and overall business management. But eventually it got to the point, and, this kind of speaks to what Laura was talking about, like, I would see things, but they didn't want to hear it. Like, they didn't actually want to fix the things or bridge those problems in a different way. They wanted to stick to kind of what's taught in school. This is the way we do business. And so eventually, about 5 years ago, I left corporate and started doing consulting on my own with businesses that actually did want to do business a different way, that they actually were interested in change and really looking at things from a new perspective. And so, yeah, I mean, all three of us have come from, this place of really seeing for many, many years, we each have a lot of expertise in business in different ways. But we all have that common thing of wanting to see business done differently, wanting people to be successful and not to make those same mistakes that we see being repeated over and over again. And a lot of it is because of kind of falsehoods within the industry, or even if it's not falsehoods, like teaching people that it has to be done this way, like kind of cookie cutter. This is the way you got to do it. If you don't do it that way, you're doing it wrong. And we really want to challenge all of that, because it's not true. A lot of that stuff is not true. So I don't know if Allison's ready or if Laura has more to talk about there, but it's just, and not only incorporate, after I left those 5 years, I've owned my own businesses. I've been in direct sales. So I've seen it across multiple industries. And then even in like the online coaching space, it's like I've seen it from many different industries, many different perspectives, but there's the same type of reoccurrences happening.
We're having super tech issues. Can anyone else? Because it's not going in any of the 3 browsers that I'm working in.
Do you want to make me host and I will fix it?
You need to be host?
Yeah.
All right, cool. Done. Thank you. Apologies, everyone. I should cut and paste them into a document. But yes, I will introduce myself as well. So my name is Alison Haitana. I'm from New Zealand, but I'm living in Australia at the moment. And I have been an entrepreneur for not a very long time, but I've worked behind the scenes in a lot of businesses for quite some time. So as helping other people like VA work and stuff like that. So I've seen a lot of things, but I've also been in corporate for quite a long time, 20 plus years or something. And so from that kind of looking on the inside out and also my own business looking in, I've really discovered that there's a lot of interesting idiosyncrasies that I think happen sometimes behind the scenes that aren't necessarily the reality of what is portrayed. And especially when we're working in an online space, I have noticed it's very different when we're working in person with people. But I have noticed that in an online space, especially, there is sometimes this little bit of a disconnect or a disembodied sense between the reality and the perception of even yourself and the perception of your brand and stuff like that. And so as you'll kind of find out when we go along a little bit further, why we're all together. Part of the reason why we're all together was because we noticed these patterns in certain places that we were working, and it was almost imperative to speak about it, because it's, from my personal standpoint anyhow, I think it's very much like a PSA or a public service announcement, that these kind of practices and ways of doing business, because of the way of evolution of humanity and stuff like that, they're just not necessarily appropriate anymore. And it's time to kind of evolve and move forward into something different. So yeah, that's where I'm kind of at with that.
Amazing. All right, so we're live on my profile.
I did see that.
Videos done, I can actually tag you both, but that was just the easiest way to do it. So yeah. So I actually fully agree with both Crystal and Alison. So my name is Laura Johnson. I have been in the business world from the time I was about 15. And, interestingly enough, I worked in a multinational business, like a multinational company, went through the ropes, and that then led me into corporate. And from there, I worked for some massive corporate companies and got to a point where, one, I got bored, and two, I got over the politics. And, because again, like being able to foresee it made me really good at the job that I did, but I could foresee what was going on, and equally I foreseen the closure of a big business I was working for. and decided to jump into the entrepreneur world. But I've always had a passion between big business and small business, and that the only real difference is the size in which we scale it. So, you know, when it comes to how we do things, it's not that different. You know, so I've always been able to have this like unique ability to be able to bring in that corporate knowledge into small business, and then how we then kind of strive to change things from that place, whilst equally thinking with a small business budget, right? So you know, and my journey over the last kind of 5 years in particular has been, you know, working alongside some small businesses, but equally, you know, growing my own. And that's been incredibly interesting as I see the dynamics start to shift. In the last 2 years, the dynamics in terms of small business and how we then like promote them has changed drastically. But what I'm actually seeing is this thing that it's like we all feel, I'm gonna generalize. It's like we all feel that we have to do things the same way that's being done out there to be successful. You know, so one of the big questions that I kind of want to really kind of highlight in this is like, successful doesn't mean having a cookie cutter approach. It doesn't mean taking on a guru or a, you know, the latest fad to be able to create the business and the structure that you want to create. What it means, you know, is going to be very individual to each person, you know, and for me, that means actually being able to be myself. It means being able to grow in a way that is in authenticity with who I am and the morals and ethics that I kind of stand for. And, you know, and that's probably like a key factor which actually brought us together, because it's like, you know, when it comes to business in itself, you know, probably going to bring in a bit of my woo-woo side, right? So like business in and of itself is its own entity. You know, it has to have its own foundations and its own morals and ethics. But what we tend to do as entrepreneurs is that we get into these business systems and structures and we actually forget that actually, if there's no foundations in place, or you're doing things that are against what you really stand for, then at some point in time, it's going to feel yuck and it's going to feel shit. And it's going to be like, you're going to get to a point where it's like, I can't do this anymore. Or it blows up in your face. You know, and what I'm really seeing at the moment is that aspect of, you know, when basically we all know that when people lose their way, it's eventually going to blow up in their face. I'm actually seeing it at a grand scale at the moment in terms of businesses. It's like when the business loses its way, it blows up in their face. And, you know, what we're tending to see at the moment is this space of, you know, really kind of coming back to like, why did you get started? Like what is success to you? What is, you know, what does that business look like? You know, and equally it can come back even down to your life. How are you living your everyday life? Is it in authenticity with who you are? Is it staying in a place of integrity, or are you willing to sacrifice those things that you stand for to make a dollar? You know, and that's kind of the riffs that we tend to have. And so the conversation from there gets a bit fluid. So because, you know, for me, over the last several years, it's been that aspect. It's that thing that it's been like, actually, you know what? I'm actually not really willing to renege on what I stand for and who I am as a person, let alone as a business owner. So I'll hand it over.
Yeah, I was gonna, you know, kind of speak to that too, is like, you know, some of the shift and the conflict almost that we've seen is, you know, when they talk about the masculine, the feminine, and that balance within business too, is, you know, corporate was very much masculine, like there's no room for emotion, there's no room for spirituality, you know, very like, you can't do that, you can't say that. And then we've seen sort of a transition over the past maybe decade. I don't know if it goes back that far, where it was kind of where people were abandoning those masculine structures and leaning into the feminine, which was great. You know, it was bringing through the intuition and all of that, but it lacked that foundations that Laura was talking about. And it's really like coming back to this place of balance, not only in business, but in your life, and really balancing, you know, yes, the intuition, yes, the emotions, yes, the passion, the ethics, you know, all of these things that are very heart-centered, but also like we have to actually execute things. Like we actually, have to bring them into the world in order to serve our people, in order to accomplish what we want to in business. So it's like this dance in business as well, of really keeping that balance between, and we've seen this in businesses, businesses that, are kind of flowy all over the place, and you kind of don't know what's going on, and they get to this place where all of a sudden, they've outgrown and they don't have the systems and structures in place to actually support the business. Or the polar opposite, where you've got kind of what Laura was talking about, where they get away from what it is they stand for, or they're just trying to make a quick buck. And what ends up happening is either there's a disconnect with their audience because they're not coming from the heart, or they get so into kind of the doing that they get burned out, and like the business isn't pleasurable to them anymore. It's like, why am I even doing this? Or they're running themselves ragged, their health suffers. So, I mean, there's like so many different avenues we can go with this. But, when Laura was talking, I was thinking about kind of that trend, that just to name something that I've seen over the years is, this balance between those two kind of heart-centered and the actual systems and structures and things that need to be done within the business.
Well, we need that like that process of the doing versus the being, right? Because that is that yin yang approach, because, and we can talk about it from all different aspects, masculine, feminine, yin yang, like balance, like doing, being, like we can talk about it in all those aspects. But it's like, if you don't have those core kind of things in place, the scales tip, and that's when you're going to start to see, whether or not like it's, illness, or you start seeing, financial difficulties, or, people overdoing things, like overworking in order to achieve, and that kind of stuff. Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I think what I've noticed, especially, and it probably is over the past 10 years as well, is this move, like there seems to be pendulum swings. That's kind of how I see them, that happen within business and within life and kind of globally. And so the pendulum swings from one to the other, and there very rarely is time where we kind of just sit in harmonious state in the middle kind of thing. And what I've really noticed over my time, especially as being an entrepreneur myself, is there were a lot of things that I kind of left to the side because I thought that they weren't important in business, because the lens that I had on business was very masculine, and it's very much related to KPIs, ROIs and things like that. And so this is kind of how I came into my business, and I didn't really understand that my business is a separate consciousness from me. And so as such, it has separate needs and wants, and it also has separate values. And this is the one thing that I kind of keep coming back to now as kind of an Indigenous person from New Zealand. Something like cultural values are very deeply embedded within just the normal fabric of everyday life. And it's something that I took for granted because it was a normal part of my life. When I moved into business, I was like, this is something not right here. Like it doesn't fit. And I figured out what it was, and it was values. Like my business had kind of acclimatized or got my values, my own personal values, and they moved into my business, but that's not actually the consciousness wanted as the values. And so I had to really restructure that and work with that. And I think as we're moving out of this kind of era that is very masculine dominated in some ways, I don't even know if it's masculine dominated. I think it's just really according to KPIs. Like when we move out of that kind of mindset and more into a harmonious balance of, yes, we need to obviously make money in our business. That's important. You don't have a business unless you're making money. That's kind of the baseline. But you can also get to have fun. You can also create from your intuition and send offers out the way you do messaging and stuff like that. So I think there's a really healthy dynamic balance that you can come to. But I think the underpinning thing that underpins it all are values. And if your business doesn't have any values, then your business will be quite rudderless. And it will take on the values of the overarching culture. And if that's not something that you want to follow, then I would suggest that you probably look at your business and what it wants its own kind of value system to be, because it'll default, because it's run by you, so it'll naturally default to the overarching system that's in play. And for a lot of us, that's, especially if you're visionaries or creatives or artists or something like that, that's kind of what we're getting out of. Like, we don't want to replicate that in our business. And so I think that's a really important point to note as well, which is why I've come across the last couple of years that perception is not the reality in the online space. And if I was a little deeper under it, it's because their business doesn't have any values, or their values are not congruent with mine, which are essentially extraction based, because they default to the overarching culture.
It's actually really fascinating when you go down that whole conversation, because it's the very things in many ways that will always have something that we try to avoid, right? So, you know, you go into whatever business you're all in, right? I'm hoping that someone's going to get this, but you'll come into this space and you'll decide to go into business, or maybe business decides you, whatever that works. But there's always something you want to avoid. For me, it was niching. It was just like, that was the niching thing, right? That was that whole thing. And, you know, I came out of my coaching training, and I was like, this whole niching thing, and then just kind of it just blew up. I was just like, I don't want to do this. But ultimately, it actually comes back down to who we are. And if we don't know who we are, then who are we in business? You know, and it seems like something that's like, of course, everybody knows who they are. But actually, you know, when it comes to our values and, you know, the things that we live by, it's actually not always a default. It's not always something that you know off the top of your head. Oh, yeah, I stand for this. Or, yeah, this is something that is actually very important to me in, you know, be it partnerships, business, life, like, you know, and it's typically not until that boundary gets pushed that you may have an awareness, particularly if you're not in the personal development world. Even in the personal development world, that's, you know, it's completely different. I expect that you would know them off the top of your head. And, you know, again, I might be generalizing, but I would expect that you can literally rip them off. But, you know, when it comes to those things, like, we will always have something that we avoid. And I find sometimes when in the reality of actually just trying to get the business off the ground, you get caught into that act of doing, and, you know, getting caught in, okay, right, you know, I put in this amount of money or this amount of effort, and this is the result that I get. Looking at, you know, your KPIs, looking at your return on investment and all that sort of stuff. But then it gets to a point where there's a plateau, and it's at that plateau point where this is where the values really need to be looked at if you haven't looked at them when you first started. Because this is that point where it's like, okay, is what I'm doing, is the things that I'm actually putting my time, energy, and money into, is that serving me?
And I think the really interesting thing that I've discovered about, you know, not only like excavating my own kind of personal values and what I stand for as an individual, but what my business values are and what they may be similar and slightly different. The really interesting thing that I've discovered is that when that becomes apparent and known, then they do become very much like a North Star in your business. And it becomes a really good way to filter out and make decisions about where you want to go and what you want to do. I mean, for example, if you have the business value of transparency, when you look out into the, you know, online space, wherever you want to go, where you're potentially looking to invest some of your time, money, and energy. And if you look at certain organizations and business and even individuals, and they don't hold that same value to you, you won't even like think twice. You'll be just like, yeah, no, that's not even a given. And it allows for this filtration to happen really easily. Which I think is quite important in business, especially as an entrepreneur, because there is such a thing as overwhelm. Like, there's just so many decisions you need to make as an individual. If you're a solopreneur, you've got to kind of do everything for a little while. And it really does help to kind of cut down all of the noise, which is really important for your own kind of mental health and like emotional well-being. So yeah, it really does help.
The first elephant in the room, right? Like investment trauma. It's like literally, it's something that's being discussed so widely at the moment in the circles that I'm in, because so many people are, you know, they've invested, you know, be it, and for me, when it comes to investment, it could be $10 or it could be $50,000. It doesn't, the amount doesn't matter, because if that's an amount for you, then that's an amount for you, right? So it's just like there's this level of investment trauma where, you know, people buy into something, but what they actually receive is either fabricated on what they expected to receive, or there was a different expectation. And there's a level of going, oh, I don't think I can actually invest in this next stage or this next phase, or because there's a level of trauma involved to be like, can I even trust myself? Like, you know, can I, you know, do I trust others? Like, you know, who can I trust in the industry to coach me, to support me, whatever that is for you? You know, and that's that part where it's like, if you are super clear on your values as a business owner, then, you know, you are going to be looking to invest in places that align to that, or at least support that.
Yeah, I listening to both of you speak, it's like, you know, talking about having, you know, that core place you come back to, that lens that you look through for your own business that's really rooted, like you said, in your value system. And, you know, it kind of brings me back to like what we want to communicate as far as what each of our individual and collective like vision is for business, and like why that's kind of brought us together. And, you know, as we're kind of talking about all of these things, it's like, you know, really helping people to, one, go back to self, and not necessarily being sold everything here, there, and the other place, but coming back to self first and saying, is this in line with my business? Is this in line with my values? Does this serve me? I don't care if it says it's the next greatest thing, the next success hack, the next, you know, business wonder, you know, whatever that they're trying to sell you. It's like really helping people come back to self, into their own individual power, and understanding that their business is unlike anybody else's. And that's why, you know, when we were talking about the cookie cutter strategies don't work, it's because we're all individual. And so what works for one business, that's great for them, but that may not work for you because it may not be aligned to the way that you want to work, one, or it may not be aligned to your individual values. So to kind of spread yourself here, it's like all of these things are a distraction, and they're pulling you out of your individual power. And in doing that, like, your business can never reach the level of success you truly desire, because you're giving your power away. You're outsourcing what it is that is most important to you in your business.
Yeah, which is that whole like shiny object syndrome. It's just like, what's that next thing? What do I need to, you know, like, and it's almost like we're in many ways, like what I see is just like people just like constantly looking outside of self for the answer. Like, and in actual fact, like something that I know that we're all passionate about is actually encouraging our clients to find the answer within them. And like, yeah, we can help with the systems and the structure and the, you know, like the throwing of ideas, but it's like actually everything you need, you already actually have. You know, you may need to set up a system, you may need to set up a structure, you may need to have a strategy put in place. But in terms of like, you know, that shiny object syndrome, you're whole as is exactly as you are. You know, and I think we've all been kind of like a little bit gun shy with some of that stuff, because it's just like, you know, how often do we look outside of self to get the answers? You know, but in actual fact, we detract from actually that stance and that power that we actually bring to what it is that we're here to do in the world.
Yeah, and I think with you know, with the last 2 years that I kind of cut out of my timeline, you know, 2020 to 2022, like when there was this mass kind of exodus into the online space and the online world and stuff like that, I think it amplified what was already happening, which was, there was a lot of, I guess, confusion, there was a lot of overwhelm, there was just a lot of people saying what they thought people wanted to hear instead of kind of the truth. And I mean, admittedly myself, I got caught up in that whole thing as well too. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that must be, you know, what was success for me is, you know, the 10K months that everyone like sprays around and stuff like that. But the reality is like, that's kind of important, but it's not my, you know, metric for success. And that's also something that's not really spoken about, is like when you come into business, especially for yourself as an entrepreneur, you create your own measuring sticks. So you create your measuring stick of success, what that means for you. You create it for fulfillment, what that means for you. You create it for how much time you're going to invest and energy and everything. You've got to create these for yourself, because the reality is that the measuring sticks that are out there are pretty whack anyhow. And they're basically constructed by a system that doesn't really want you to get ahead in life.
Perception
and I mean,
versus reality.
yeah, and I mean, that's a kicker. I was talking to someone the other day about it was just something really basic, like talking about medical tests, and I was like, so who created that measuring stick, and why was that even in existence in the first place, and is that even still relevant now? It's also another thing too, relevancy. Like, is that relevant now? Is it even relevant to me? And a lot of it isn't. So I think for me, myself personally, moving through my business kind of journey, because it's definitely been a spiritual journey as well, is a lot of it was actually trusting that, because of my previous experience working in corporate, hospitality, event management and stuff like that, I had all of the kind of components that I needed, all the puzzle pieces that I needed. I just needed to sit down and actually give myself a moment to put them in the places that they needed to go to create the kind of puzzle that I was going to create. And that isn't something that's really spoken about much. You know, they all want to sell you a strategy. They want to sell you how to get from A to kind of Z in the fastest time frame possible. But everyone's unique. Everyone's different. Strategy, that doesn't work for everyone. It just doesn't. And I mean, there are certain things that are strategic, i.e. you can view pricing as being strategic instead of like the emotionally charged thing that many people kind of say, oh, you know, you charge what you're worth and all this stuff, which is bollocks. But yeah, pricing is a strategy. Like, and it's a strategy. It's not an emotional, you know, it's not how much you're worth, because you're, you know, valueless. You're limitless kind of thing. You have limitless value. Like, no one can place a dollar value on who you are. So there's lots of things that go through it. Yeah.
Ultimately, it has to feel good. Like, it doesn't, you know, and it's something I say to clients all the time. Like, and obviously it also depends on like the systems that are actually coming up. Yeah, a system that's coming up for them. Like, if they've got something coming up around pricing, for instance, then you can either go one of two ways. You can make it strategic, or you can make it divinely led, or, you know, like just literally being like, oh, this is what I feel like doing, right? So, and I think it really is about understanding. Again, it comes back to understanding yourself. Where are your trigger points? And what are the things that you're most likely to procrastinate on because it's, you know, it's triggering, it's hard, it's like whatever that is. And therefore it's the path of least resistance. So it's like, you know, those things that really don't actually matter. It's like, that's the path of least resistance. It's like, you know, and then the things that matter, take the time, spend the energy on digging deeper on those things. You know, like one of my favorite sayings, which I say quite often, is you can't circumnavigate the inner work. So there's no way that you can bypass that. So it's like, you know, if you're having some stuff come up around, whether it's, you know, whether you're in the building phase of your business, or where you've hit a stagnation point, or maybe you're redirecting what you do, right? Like, it's like, you can't circumnavigate the inner work, and it's so vital. And if you don't do it, it will continue to come back up. So it's like in every single area. And this is where, you know, like I kind of commented before, I was saying, you know, like perception versus reality. It's like sometimes we may see, you know, very successful, kind of like the perception of very successful businesses go under. And, you know, the reality is that because the business as a whole has its own entity, if the inner work is being avoided, or the person that's running that business isn't doing their, isn't kind of pulling their weight, and they're trying to circumnavigate just to kind of get to that shiny object, then there's going to be hurdles in the road, and obviously we're talking about small business here. Like, when it comes to corporate, it's a bit of a different kind of situation, but but you can't circumnavigate the inner work. But what you can do is the things that, if pricing is not something that really matters, price yourself in the market, get it over and done with, and just tick the box. If it does matter to you, then that's where you kind of go, okay, I need to tap in what's coming up for me right now. Am I trying to justify the amount of hours and energy that I put into something before I price it? Like, how hard am I making it? And these are the kinds of topics that, are thrown around all the time. I know with all of our clients, because it's like, these are the kinds of things that we can get so bogged down in the nitty-gritty details that it feels hard. It feels like that you get to the end of that whole conversation, and it's like, shit, didn't even talk about what it was that I was actually going to sell. But in actual fact, to me, that stuff's just all that, if you can just tick those little things off, and you literally just chalk them up as just irrelevant details, get to the inner work. What is it that I really want to actually sell? Like, who do I want to serve? Who do I want to help? And we can go down the whole path. What is the ideal client? Like, what is the niche I want to work in? What are those things? But if something is triggering you, you can't just sweep it under the rug. You can't just ignore it. But I do believe in playing with the path of least resistance and just going, right, keep it freaking simple.
Yeah, it's like that was one of our main topics that we've talked about so much in between the three of us, is just how overcomplicated and how overwhelmed we get because we get so bogged down in all of that. And some of that is coming back to self, like not falling into the fear or the guilt of like marketing out there and saying, oh, well, if I'm not doing this, am I doing something wrong? And so it's like, it's easy to get caught up in all those things, whether they're external things kind of being put on us, like you need to do this, you need to have this kind of website, you need to have this kind of logo, you need, all of those, or if it's internal things that we're getting bogged down in the details, and we get in this cycle that we're not really accomplishing anything. We're not really looking at what is going to propel my business forward at this point. Do I actually need those things right now? Or is my energy better spent on something else? And that's one of the things that was our vision, is to make business simple for people so that it's not so overwhelming, because each of us have been in that space. I mean, each of us are entrepreneurs of ourselves. And so it's like, we've come out of coaching programs or, learning new modalities or whatever. And then it's like, we've talked about, it's like, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, now I need to learn how to do a social media strategy. Oh, now I need to learn how to do a website. And it's like, you get so caught up in all these things you feel like you have to do that you're actually not getting anything done in your business. And then you're sitting back and feeling overwhelmed. You're feeling guilty because you like invested your time, energy, money in these things that you were like, had this big expectation of going out and serving your clients, but then you're not doing it because you're so caught up in the muck, in the busy work, in the day-to-day details that may not even matter for your business.
I'm clearly going to be clearing in that one. So, so for those who don't know, so I'm actually an emotional clearing practitioner. So straight away went into it, but yeah, because I literally can relate so much to that. I remember coming out of my my NLP training, and and I loved my training, and I love my trainer. If he watches this, so, but literally it was like I had this modality, and it was like, okay, now what do I do? Oh, I have to learn how to promote. Like, I have to learn how to speak about myself. and I need to learn social media. All right, so I'm going to do a social media program. I'm going to do a social media course. I'm going to learn social media. I actually want to learn ClickFunnels, and then it was like, you have to learn how to do a webinar. So it was like the webinar. And I remember like chatting to ladies when we first started talking about this stuff. It's like, it was the webinar. And then it was like, okay, so now I need to learn how to build a website. All right, so I'll go and I build a website, and I'd already had web background, but not in HTML5. So I went and learned that. But then it was like, but by the time you actually do all those things, then you actually have to write the content for that. But what is it I actually want to write content about? Oh, okay, I'm going to actually do a program that teaches me what my niche is, right? So I'm going to learn what my niche is, and I'm going to go down that path. And every point I would get to my roadblock, whatever that was, I'd get to my roadblock. And, I would scrap, particularly like, so I'm going to talk about niching because everyone knows how much I love niching. Not. So, so I'd get to that point where I was like ready to promote, and I'd be like, nah, scrap it. I'm done. I'm out. Right. So I reckon the first 12 months I had like 4 different niches. And then it gets to a point where there was always something standing in the way. And I realized that actually in all of those things that I'd been like looking to learn, in actual fact, I actually didn't need any of them. Because if you're getting clients and you're making some money, you can actually pay someone to do those things. Yes, it's a great idea for you to know how to do them. But in actual fact, my time was actually much better spent doing the inner work, doing the work on the things that I needed to do that next phase, or to create that next journey, or bring in the next client base, or, whatever that was. And, that's something that, in all of this, like, we hope that by our sharing our stories, sharing our journey, that we can actually help you guys circumnavigate the stuff you just don't need, the muck, like the stuff that you just, it's all well and good for you to know how to do them if that's something that you're passionate about. But if you're not, then, like, it's not needed, and, coming through the other end of this, it's just like, now I look at things and it's very much like, can I do that myself, or can I actually outsource that? Because sometimes, in the initial part of the business, you are doing 100% of it. You are doing everything, and I'm not talking being at a certain level before you can outsource, right? I'm talking about bartering with friends who know how to do things, or, paying, literally being able to source within your kind of your friend base, or whatever it is that you need to do. But it's getting super clear, it's like, and this is where I do come back to some of my corporate stuff. It's like, what is an income producing activity? Is this thing that I'm going to do right now, is that going to create income? If it's a social media post and you're procrastinating that, and it takes you all day to write it, but then you don't get no one likes, like, no one puts a like, there's no engagement. Was that a good use of your time? Or could you write a shorter social media post? Could you do a 2-minute reel or a video that creates engagement? And then you have the rest of the day to, to play, to strategize, to actually be in your element, or be in your energy. So it's really looking at the things that do work for you versus the things that don't. Rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, it's funny, actually. I was watching a live stream with Marie Forleo and Matthew McConaughey. And Marie Forleo has this really interesting saying that is simplify to amplify. And it's something that I think is like completely brilliant, because in my head, like, there is a lot of superfluous activities that you can do as an entrepreneur. There's a lot of tinkering on the edges that one could do. But the reality is, and it's very simple, if you're in business to make money, make profit, is that you need an offer, you need an audience to sell it to, you need to communicate that offer to that audience, and you need to sell it. That's all you need. It doesn't say anything about websites, doesn't say anything about any other kind of strategy, but it's basically just having an offer, having someone to talk to about it, and keep selling it, and again and again and again. And it's like repetition, focus, and dedication. And that's ultimately, if you're talking about simplifying business, that's what it's about.
And be excited.
And,
Be enjoying what you're doing.
have an offer that you love, obviously that totally helps. Talk about it to anyone and be super passionate about it, because if you're, and this is something that I've learned from somebody, like if you're not passionate about your offer, how is somebody else going to feel that from you? And I've definitely known that, like over time, like with certain offers that I have, I'm like, others, not, amazing, I love them, and they're like my children. But I think that's also something as well, like to keep in mind, like business is very basic. It's very simple. And then you just keep it, rinse and repeat, 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 repeat. It'll refine. You'll find stuff along the way. There'll be input, feedback, and that's how you kind of build it from there. But it also takes, courage, grit, determination. Like these are personal qualities that an entrepreneur has. Resilience is a big one as well too, but also knowing that just within your friend group, or even within like people, within a very close sphere of you, pretty much got everything that you need. It's just, are you going to tap into that to kind of ask people for help? That's also another big thing. I think, sometimes as entrepreneurs, we don't want to ask for help, but the reality is that everyone needs help. It's a total, not only is yourself and your business a separate consciousness, but you're actually collaborating together. And so when you collaborate, you're actually collaborating also with other people as well. And so that kind of co-creation that happens, like, we're not in a vacuum. And part of it is, as to have longevity and sustainability, I think as an entrepreneur, you really do need to lean on people that you really care about, that care about you. And also not have necessarily the same vision as you, but, I'm willing to help you along the way. I think that's really, really important, because everyone needs a village.
Which actually goes into like the next live stream that we're actually going to be doing is the House of Cards, which is really building the foundations. Like, what are those foundations? I think I wrote those earlier, but like your system structures, how to bring out the ethics and morals and all that. So, and we do have to set an evening next week, or an evening our time in Australia, but morning in the US. But is there, I just want to try to keep us on time, so it's like not to keep everyone kind of here for too long. Is there any like parting words that you guys want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I just think, we kind of touched on, we called this the elephant in the room. We kind of touched on why we called it that, and touched on briefly some of the elephants in the room, some of the misconceptions. But we also really want to hear from you, because we have kind of, a general idea, like the next one's going to be on the system, structures, foundations of your business. What do you want us to riff on? What do you want to hear about? What questions do you have? Where have you gotten hung up before? So, we're going to do that. I think we're talking tentatively. The third one is kind of like the tripwires, the things that you get caught up in business. That can be potential hazards, or cause your business to either fall apart or have kind of a downflux or whatever. But yeah, I just really wanted to bring it back. Like, we're here for you. Like, the whole reason we did this is because we each are so passionate about helping other people succeed in their business. So we definitely want your feedback. And if there's anything in particular that you'd like to hear about it, and it kind of fits, the format of this live stream series, we would love to hear about it.
Let's face it, we'll talk on any topic. So at the end of the day, I mean, like for me, like parting words, like it really does come back to, we did call this the elephant in the room, and really shattering some of those illusions. And I know that we didn't get deeply into some of those things this evening, just obviously just ended up riffing on some other stuff. But for me personally, it really is about sending you all away with something to think about, and so like what I really want to leave you with is, what are those things that you are finding that are tripping you up? Like where are the areas in which, you are needing some support, or maybe you're just feeling a little bit lost, a little bit scattered. take a deep breath, come back to yourself. Remember why you started. Just remember why you started. Whatever industry you're in, whatever you're doing, remember why you started. And then what is the ultimate, like what is it that you really want to achieve? You know, come back to those things. And again, it gets to be simple. It gets to be, you get to enjoy it. It gets to be fun. It's not meant to be fucking hard. And it's just been so overcomplicated that, you know, I can't tell you how often I get messages that say, I think I'm done. Because it's gotten so overcomplicated. No, so yeah, so just think about that. Let us know, message us, tag us, whatever's kind of going on in your world. We would love to be able to riff on whatever's coming up for you. And we won't even share your name. So you don't, it gets to be private.
I think also the other thing, because I'm not too sure, I mean, I didn't touch on it, but I think it might be important as well to hear, is that the elephant in the room is kind of what brought us all together. So as I was talking about, you know, you kind of need a community and a village when you're an entrepreneur. Both Crystal and Lauren and I have had a experience in a same kind of industry with the same organization. And because of the experience that we all felt during that time frame, we all kind of came out of it. And it was, I mean, it was a little bit heartbreaking for me. I'm going to talk about my personal experience. It was a little bit heartbreaking for me, and it took me a while to kind of move through it. And when we were kind of still in touch and stuff like that, and just like talking, communicating, like it's not until you kind of go through it and you look back and you go, whoa, that was crazy times. And then you kind of think, oh my God, I'm so grateful, A, that I wasn't alone, because let's admit it, we're never alone, even in an experience like that. And then the second thing was like, gosh, I'm so grateful that I had other people to talk to about this experience that we all went through. And now because of that, we've communicated and we've kind of worked through it and stuff like that, and we're collaborating together. And I mean, that's the shared kind of experience that we've gone through. But I think it's also really important because that experience that kind of catalyzed us into what we're doing now, which is basically this live stream series. And I think that's probably really important because that's almost like a genesis point for why the three of us are here anyhow.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, you know, what Laura said, that sometimes in life, you know, things that aren't necessarily comfortable or maybe even good happen to you, but they help you really ground down into what is important for me, what are my core values, what are absolute, like, draw the line in the sand. And so like through that experience, each of us, I think, found our voice a little bit more, because I can speak for myself. I tend to be a little bit of an introvert sometimes. And sometimes it takes something major happening, especially if I see it happening on a collective level and harming other people, that it's like, no, it's not okay. Like, you know, you can do that to me and I might, you know, be able to like just deal with it. But when I see other people being harmed, and this is kind of what we're seeing in business, like people are not being able to be successful, or they're being held back through these different things that are going on, these different belief systems, that we really felt like this is our call to service, to really speak candidly, honestly, and just have these conversations so that each of you can see things, you know, through those illusions and not fall into some of those same traps that, you know, we had to kind of walk through. But in the same way, so grateful for those things, because had it not been for that, I don't know that us three would be here, and that we would have the same voice and the same, I guess, passion about speaking about these things.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? Like I think, you know, had we not had that experience that ended up, you know, I suppose in some ways being incredibly devastating and detrimental to our own like emotional well-being, let alone, you know, who we are in business, right? So like had we not had that collective experience, I'm not sure that we would have had the depth of conversations that we've actually had. And, you know, I know for myself, like I've really got to a place where I'm just like, I am so grateful that I've had both of you to kind of lean on, as well as, you know, like my own like coach and support network, because, you know, through that, I'm actually able to see through the veil. And, you know, and that's really kind of like, you know, when we start talking about the elephants in the room, it's really getting caught up in a systemization that sometimes not is all as it seems, you know. And, you know, when we start talking about that, when it comes to business, particularly entrepreneurial business, it's like, okay, how we don't actually need to pretend that we're anything that we're not. There's nothing there that needs to be pretend. There's nothing there that you need to, you know, other than your ego stepping in to, you know, to feel better. It's, you know, these are the things that we actually get to take the gloves off, you know, finding, like, I know for myself, I found my voice. I found the things that I'm just like, I am not willing to negotiate on. I'm not willing to sit back and pretend that I'm not seeing. And, you know, I'm equally not willing to not speak about it. At the same time, there's a part of me that's just like, I'm not giving energy to the negativity of the shit that went on, but let's talk about the lessons in this, because there's a magnitude of lessons, you know. And that's the part where I've kind of got to these days, where it's just like, actually, you know, how do we flip this? How do we flip this so that, yeah, every single person doesn't have to walk the road that we walked, and they actually get to stand in their own power, in their own authenticity, and be in integrity with who they are in the business that they're creating, you know. And that's not to say that any of us were out of integrity. It's just that literally the shitstorm that kind of went on around us created this vortex in many ways that, you know, once that veil had been lifted, it was, you couldn't unsee. And sometimes, you know, I know for myself, I actually felt as though I was alone, even though we're in that together. Like, I felt like I was alone. I felt like it was happening just to me, and that, you know, somehow I was responsible, you know. And it wasn't until, you know, we had a collective conversation that I actually realized that I wasn't alone, that it had nothing to do with me, you know. And that's where I actually got that gratitude for the level of work that I have personally done, because, you know, it was coming through that, you know, where we can actually see that something that is completely fucked up actually has a silver lining.
Yeah, and I mean, further on to that as well too, I think, like, from a personal kind of transformational kind of perspective, and, you know, I would generalize this and say, you know, many people have probably been through this experience. It's just the characters and the kind of landscape is slightly different. Everyone's experienced betrayal, you know, everyone's experienced kind of heartache, and everyone has experienced deception on some level. And I think for me, kind of, I went in eyes wide open. And I think part of that was because there was something that I saw that didn't quite feel right, but I needed to investigate the matter further, kind of thing. And I'm grateful for that, because ultimately the depths of, I guess, heartache, you know, that I experienced myself personally means in some ways that, yes, the veil has fallen, but also that I can see, it's like piercing through reality, where you can actually see these kind of like unhelpful patterns and kind of energies emerging in the way that someone may talk about themselves, the way that they talk about the offers, or even the way that their business is set up, the way that, you know, they may perceive to be out in the kind of marketplace, especially the online marketplace. Like, you can actually just see the veil like fall, and it's a very bizarre thing. But for me personally, I can look at somebody's socials now and be like, that's not quite 100% who they are representing themselves to be. And I mean, it's heartbreaking totally to see that, but now it's just like, yeah, there's like all these little flags that just pop up now. Like, it's just, yeah. And this, I think, is the reason why we're talking out, because it's quite prevalent, and there's a lot of places and spaces that kind of enforce this kind of deception in a way, because ultimately we're talking about money, and it's a very motivating thing for people, motivating totally. But, you know, the reality is that we're moving ages, we're changing, we're evolving. And as we're evolving, so does business, and it has to. And this is part of what we're seeing in the vision kind of that we have in the future and stuff like that. It would be more collaborative. It won't be competition. And there'll be other metrics that are more important than money.
And I think like I feel really strongly that it's a bit of a karmic cycle that's been collapsed. Like it's just, you know, for me, it's been a something that had come up like numerous times in my lifetimes, and it's like it's broken that cycle. And to be fully aware of where that came from and how that's then played out to be now. And you know, and I do see, you know, we all hear and talk, particularly in like female spaces, of, you know, being in collaboration and you know, being in supportive networks, and you know, women supporting women and that kind of stuff. And you know, obviously coming from a corporate background, I started my coaching career basically coaching a lot of men. And you know, like at the end of the day, like I just see this collaboration across the sexes, you know, just to be in collaboration regardless of, you know, who you are and what you do, to actually have this place where, you know, everybody gets to have an active contribution, and it's a positive influence, you know. And you know, but it has been a complete like a dissolvement of the deception and the disillusion of, you know, the illusions that are placed, you know, aka the removal of the rose tinted glasses, you know. And but equally, like, and there's a level of judgment that happens from the external realities of wherever we are, right? Like we're always going to place judgment on no matter where we look at. But it's like sometimes that judgment is just, you know, sometimes it comes from a place of like it's an inner knowing. And you know, I kind of alluded to it on a post I wrote the other day, of always being able to see like through the bullshit, always being able to tell a lie from a truth from a mistruth. I've always been able to tell, but I still play this game with myself that I'm trying to convince myself that I'm not right, you know. And this was one of those situations where I was just like, damn it, why did I play that game again? You know. So yeah.
So I think just to rein it all back in, they always say I'm the one to rein it back in. So drop your comments in like what you want to hear about, and then we will be communicating. I believe everybody here did their email. Is that correct, Allison, as far as like when the next live stream is? And yeah, I think I saw somebody wasn't sure how they connected with us. So we definitely are going to respond to that. Make sure you know how to get that connected. Once we set the date next week for the House of Cards dealing with system structures, foundations in your business, we will make sure to communicate that. You can connect with each of us on social media if you would like to do that. Alison, Laura, anything you want to add there? Because I saw that in the comments, so I wanted to come back to that and make sure everybody knew like how to find us again.
Yeah, that's fine. Once we set the date for the next one, I've got everyone's emails, and I'll send you the actual date and time with a calendar link and the Zoom link and stuff as well. Yeah, it will be next week. And there potentially could be two, but there'll definitely be one. But yeah, thank you all for coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. What to talk about, you know?
Yeah. No, I don't have anything else, because if I do, I'm going to open up another can of worms. And I think, you know, given the fact that we've just gone over the hour mark, I think that's actually a nice one for this evening. So, but please, connect with us. So, you know, we love hearing your feedback. Happy to riff on absolutely anything. There's actually no topic that is not talkable. You know, and I say that from being in inappropriate groups everywhere. So like, but yeah, in terms of business, there's no topic that's untalkable. Like literally, I'm a responder. So if you ask me a question, I will riff on it. And, you know, I know that both Alison and Crystal have very similar feelings.
Yeah, but just thank you again for turning up, showing up and stuff. Really appreciate it. And once we got all the tech sorted, yay. But yeah, we'll send an email out, and potentially there'll be also, well, I mean, we've recorded this as well, so this might be on like another platform. We've just got to figure that out. But if it is, then that information will be in the email as well. Cool. Thank you.
Good
Thank
night.
you. I hope you all have a good day.
Yes, day, night, evening.
Yeah.
Hope you have a good day. I'm going to bed.
Yeah, I'm about to take my daughter to school, so
Yeah, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
thank you.
See you all later.
Bye.
Bye.